I was telling Tim Sunday about the invitation, and I said, yeah, I've got this thing almost iced. I've almost got it done. And the same thing happened to me 6 months ago when I was prepared for the invitation, and then I realized the day of the invitation that I was given the invitation was September 11th. And that skewed what I had to say. My heart was drawn to speak of the events of September 11th. And the same thing happened this week. I was pretty set on what I was going to say. And then I woke up yesterday morning to the devastating news of the tornadoes in Nashville. And the reports started coming in, and you see the devastation, and you hear the reports of the dead. And then you realize there's a couple dozen people dead. There's a couple families that are our brethren that died in Nashville. And that pulled at my heart and skewed what I wanted to say this evening. I've thought a lot about legacy the last few years. If any of you have been in my house, it's full of legacy. My grandmother and great-grandmother and great-grandmother's things. And what happened in Nashville got me to thinking about legacy. As much as it's painful to say, their legacy, their fate, whatever's going to happen is set. It's done. There's no changing. There's no going back. There's no shoulda, woulda, couldas. There's no redos. There's no changes. It's done. And my father being a photographer and my grandmother being just this short of being a hoarder, which she really wasn't, but I have probably 30 or 40 boxes in my loft of legacy that I'm going through. And sorting through these things is cathartic. It's painful sometimes. Sometimes it's joyous. Sometimes it's like, why did they keep that? And it goes straight into the trash. But what it's made me realize is that all of this stuff that was my great-great-grandmother's and my great-grandmother's and my grandmother's and my mother and father's is just stuff. There's stuff that's important to me, but there's a lot of stuff that just goes in the trash right away. There's things that were probably more important to generations, a couple generations before me that aren't important now because I'm 2 generations removed from it. So you have to make those decisions when you're going through all that stuff. I have my great-great-grandmother's Bible, Alice Strader. Pretty cool thing to have. You open it up, you see what was important to her, where she was taking notes, what was important. I have, and I just brought a couple of props, but I have my great-grandparents' psalm books that they took to church, that they sent, just like we were singing tonight. They were singing hymns. Here's Agnes Elmore and Ira Elmore, and they lived at 1028 West 36th Street here in Indianapolis. I've got their songbooks. I have my grandmother's Bible. Tyler's used that as a prop during one of his lessons, my grandmother's Bible. She has copious notes in Obadiah. How did she do that? But Obadiah is full of notes. That's part of her legacy. Most of you may know this, but when I lead singing, most of the time I use my father's songbook. It's a neat thing to know that I'm holding what he sang hymn to the church in. It's part of his legacy. So then I got to thinking, well, what's my legacy going to be? I've got a beautiful wife, Joanna. She's a faithful Christian. We've been married for 30 plus years. We have 3 beautiful daughters. I have a son-in-law, twin grandbabies on the way. That's part of the legacy. That's a pretty cool thing. But where am I going with all this? How many people in this room knew my great-great-grandparents personally? How many people in this room at least knew or met my great-grandparents? Levon and Violet's probably it, okay? How many of you knew Ted and Gladys Bond personally, met them? Okay, there's a few hands going up. How many of you know me? How many of you know my kids? You see the difference? Time goes by. Time marches on. And what was important 100 years ago now is just a distant memory. And that's the way life is, and that's what happened in Nashville. Some people are going to die like my relatives did of natural causes, and some people are going to die of natural disasters. Solomon said time and chance are going to take us all. So if you will, if you want to follow along, I'm going to read now from James chapter 4, starting in verse 13. Come now, you say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, to him it is sin. So that's the crux of the whole matter. Going through all this legacy, all that matters, all that we are guaranteed, all that we have is right now. That's it. It doesn't matter what my relatives did 100 years ago or 75 years ago or 25 years ago or even yesterday. I have control over my fate, and you have control over your fate right now. That is what we're promised. So if you know, and you do, if your life isn't right with God, if you either need to be immersed in the waters of baptism or you need to come before this congregation and ask for God's help and ask for our help, please do so as we stand and sing.